There's yet another kind of shame. The shame of feeling polluted not by your own sins, but the sins of others. The shame of the innocent, misused, abused, dirtied, not by their own will and own desires, but by those of another. It is the shame of a rape victim, a beaten spouse, the molested child. Like the smell of secondhand smoke, it clings to the non-smoker. So this stench of shame clings to the innocent, ever reminding them of how others have breathed upon them the smoke of their iniquities. It is as real, if not more real, than the shame we feel when we've done something wrong. Great. No, hold on. my print went all screwy. Most often we feel guilty because of it, as if we invited this horror into our lives. If guilt may be likened to a heavy heart, then shame may be compared to an unclean heart, soiled and smelling of death, crying out for the water of purification, anything to wash away the stain. Wouldn't it be great if there were something that could de-shame us? Wouldn't it be incredible if we had something that could cleanse us of shame as effectively as soap and water cleanse our bodies of dirt? Wouldn't it be infinitely worth more than all the gold and precious jewels of the world? Yes, of course it would. Yet on our own, we do not have it. We have nothing to shame us, nothing in which to battle our shame-blackened hearts. Bury that shame 15 feet deep into the soil of your mind, but eventually it will resurface. Try to burn your shame to the ashes, and the fire will only make it glow hotter and brighter. You do not have this something that can de-shame you. All right, that's it. But it gives you the idea of what I was talking about how shame kind of is like something that it's not just on your surface. It goes into your pores. It's inside of you. I mean, many people would say it goes into your heart, hardens your heart, but I've done so much brain research because of my injury that I always think everything starts with the brain. So I would say it'd be more like it affects your thinking. Your thinking is what guides how you recover from your own traumas. It's how you think. Not so much how you feel, because feelings change. And especially as you age and time passes, your feelings will change. You're not going to feel the same 2 days after it happened than you're going to feel 20 years later. But the thoughts, you know how like people say, oh, if you run into an old friend, you just start talking just like you had never been apart. It's kind of like that with shame. It's like once you bring up the subject again, if you haven't talked about it, and like I honestly haven't talked about what happened to me in college for decades, really. So, but I find when I do now, like the thoughts that I thought about myself back then or thought about the situation are almost exactly the same as they were. I mean, like, it's just like picking up with not an old friend, with like a terrible villain, I guess. Anyway, let's get back to the story. How does this have to do with intergenerational trauma? Well, my mother, who had polio, she had to wear a back brace during she got a deformed arm, and she was bedridden for a couple of years, and because there was a big polio epidemic here in Evansville, and so she ended up having like a metal rod kind of up her back, and then it would like click here around her neck. It was like, this part wasn't metal, it was more like, you know how like retainers, they have that like sort of cloth, I don't know what you want, collar or something that holds the retainer, kind of like that. Anyway, she went to a high school. It's not very far from here, and she would walk. It's probably like a 15-minute walk to school from our house. And one day, I think she was 16, she was walking home from school. This is a long time ago. This is like in the 50s. And she was from the back, some man, I don't know who he was. I don't know if he was somebody who was a vagrant and sleeping in the it's not a park, it's just like this, next to a church and residential homes, there's like, it's like an area that's got like tall trees and a lot of bush and vines and stuff. It's just like it's almost like they took a small area that was a forest and then cut down most of it to make this big church building and make these homes. So it's like whatever they left. But a man dragged her from the sidewalk all the way into the wooded area, and luckily for her, some of the people who lived in those residential homes called the police because they saw it and they heard her screaming, and she had like scrapes and, you know, just all the tree branches had just like, you know, raked at her skin, and, you know, the areas where he had like grabbed and held her, but, you know, he had dragged her in there and started to undress her because he was going to obviously do something sexual. And but he was apprehended and she was freed, and before that took place. So that's an event that I was actually really surprised my family told me about, because they didn't really talk about stuff like that. I mean, very often, in fact, my family was well known for avoiding topics that were, you know, traumas that had happened, but maybe my grandmother did it as a way to explain what might have caused my mom's schizophrenia. Was they say that schizophrenia lies dormant in your system, and sometimes a traumatic event can activate the gene. That's not like what everybody has. It's just like people who have a predilection to that particular diagnosis. Okay, so that would be, I don't have the percentages, but it's not a high percentage of people. The high percentage of people is siblings, especially twins, or children of schizophrenics. There is think it's like 50% if both of your chance of getting it if both your parents have it. And that's what I was always so scared of, because even though my dad was bipolar, he still had bipolar 1, which comes with active hallucinations. So he had all that same stuff that a lot of schizophrenics have. He just had it for like short periods of time, unlike a schizophrenic who is basically like that all the time. Anyway, the reason I bring this, I'm sorry, I'm so tired tonight. I'm not doing a very good job of speeding along the story. Okay, so that would be an instance of intergenerational, I hate this word, trauma, because that was an experience my mother had. And then like what they would say then is like, then if subsequent generations have sort of sexual violence against them, then that would be, you could consider that the legacy continuing. And they also think that like children who have been like in wars or have been homeless with their parents, like a lot of times that kind of stress and anxiety, or like if they haven't had enough to eat, or their families have, there's a lot of violence in the home, that kind of stuff can be then passed on, the anxiety of it, or just like it changes your structure of your DNA. It changes the structure of your cells, okay, because it's more like activates sort of like that survival mode. So the thinking is then that would carry into, I mean, these are all done by like many studies. Like I'm not just getting this out of like some Psychology Today article. This is like been studied to death. So it would mean that the subsequent generations would have more of a vulnerability, they'd be more vulnerable to have similar experiences, because that part of their psyche would be weaker. It would be more susceptible to not doing well if that same situation. It's not like saying the same thing's going to happen. I mean, that's different with like alcoholism. Then they are saying like biologically that is going to happen again. But this is more like your psyche. So it's more like psychological. Okay, so it's like saying, not that the event is going to happen again for sure, but that if the event were to happen to subsequent generations, they would be more weakened in those areas to defend themselves mentally against not becoming kind of emotionally obliterated by the event. It's like they're more susceptible to not getting over it. Not that you get over something like that, but not healing. Like their ability to heal from it or move on from it would be more difficult. They would have a harder time coping with it, because that part of their structure of their body and mind is and maybe their spiritual capacity too would be delineated. All right, so I guess now I have to tell my part and then I'll wrap it up. But yeah, I really was avoiding this, but I do feel like I should make a video about shame, because honestly, I'm finding in my own life that I've gotten to a point where I've kind of gone through all the different events in my life one by one and trying to like do shadow work and get rid of some of the mental debris and bad feelings and bitterness and like, you know, like unforgiveness, like all that stuff, like trying to anger, just trying to work through different things and release them so that I can have a better life. Because when you hold on to all that stuff, it honestly, it makes you it ages you, it makes you make worse decisions because you're like kind of filled with all this negativity. And you also have lower self-esteem because you don't think good things are going to happen to you. That's always my problem, is I think good things are going to happen to me, but I always think more bad things are going to happen than good things, and then it'll sort of drag down the... Sorry about my nails. I've got like 3 broken nails, so I look wretched. Yeah, I always think the bad all outweighs the good, but that's why I'm trying to do all this work on myself, so that I stop thinking that. Because honestly, if I like write it all out, my whole complete history or whatever, probably there are so many, I wouldn't say it, I mean, it's probably more like even, but probably more good things. But the bad things were really bad. So I think the worst thing about the bad things that happened in my life is they kind of have just been like one after the other after the other, and with the, you know, like there's been like hardly a break in between events. So it's just like the ability to like sort of rest, recuperate, reevaluate, and sort of come back with like that nothing hanging on me. It's like it's been almost impossible, because like as soon as I get over, well, not get over, but you know, as soon as I process something, it's like then the next event comes, and it's just like back to back to back to back. And if you have all that piling up, it's super bad, you know, because you're gonna just, your chance of just having lower self-esteem or like confidence or hope for your future, or you know, like you don't get rest because you have all these nightmares, you know, or insomnia. It's just like you have side effects from PTSD. It's just like it's very hard to get on with one's life, you know, because you're just sort of plagued by all this crap. All right, so I guess now I've put it off long enough, I'll have to talk about my own shameful events. And then that's going to be it, because I think that's about all I can take. So the first rape that happened to me was when I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but I'm just going to go over, because it's in one of my other videos, I'll just go over like stuff I hadn't talked about when I originally told the story. I had a very long and not good relationship. Was a relationship where there was alcoholism, there was physical violence, there was verbal abuse. It was just with a man who was, well, he was 4.5 years older than me. I met him when I was 14. So I was with him, I'd say 3 years, that felt like 12. And it was basically because I wanted to get away from my mom, and well, visiting my biological mother, and I was in a constant war with my grandparents I lived with. It was their daughter, about whether I had to go constantly and see her and spend time with her. And she, you know, she was a violent person because she would not take medication or get any therapy. So I came up with this great scheme when I was 14 that I would like get married by 16, and then I would, you know, save myself, I guess, I don't know, this whole scheme just to get out of 2 years of seeing her. Like, it just seems like dumb now when I look back at it, because at 18 I would have been legally free of having been made to go see her. But anyway, my young brain, that sounded like a really great plan. Not great, but you know what I mean. A feasible plan. So he ended up breaking up with me when I was maybe almost 17, I think, or the end of 16 or something. And that was probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me, though. At the time, I think I was really devastated because I had got kind of that thing where you get sort of attached to your abuser, where you're just, it's like all you know. And so I also had a lot of guilt and shame about having had sex with someone so young. And so then I felt like I lived in a very conservative area, and I kind of felt like I should stay with that person because that's who I gave my virginity to, which sounds ridiculous now in modern times, but that is actually the way I thought back then. And even if I was unhappy, it makes no sense now. But that somebody who ended up, then I think I saw him one more time after the breakup. I ended up having another short, positive, good relationship after that. And who knows how many relationships he had, but he moved away. Then I ended up moving to the same area where he was on the East Coast, so we were in the same state. So like New York is gigantic, so like if two people were in New York doesn't really mean much. So I wasn't even in the city, I was in the suburbs outside of past the Bronx. So anyway, like I say, my first year of college, I don't know how I did it because there was no Google, there was no internet, there was, I used a word processor in college. Somehow he got the address of where I lived on campus, and then it was crazy because I had 2 other roommates. I don't know why this happened. Just super bad luck. But I had 2 roommates, but they weren't there that evening. And he just walked in my door. And I was like, it was kind of hard to get to my dorm because it was like a 2nd or 3rd floor, and it was in a building that did not look like a dormitory. It was like the main, like, I don't know what you want to call it, the like main guest house of the campus, like where visiting parents and stuff would come, or like freshmen. I mean, it was my freshman year. It was like where the college whoever was head of the college, that's where her office was. I mean, it was like this, and then our dorms were sort of above it. It was just a very strange building. So anyway, he just comes in the room, and I haven't seen him in, at that point, a couple of years or something. And or I don't know, all the times are just weird. And here's where shame comes in. I was so fearful that people on campus would see me with him because he was obviously older than me, and I considered him part of my past I was deeply ashamed of. And I was at this new school, and it was like states and states away from where my hometown, and I felt like I was getting a fresh start, and I did not want any of my past. I didn't want anybody at the school to find out what I had done to try to get away from my mom. Like, I was deeply ashamed of what I'd done. Like, I hated myself for it. And so instead of thinking like I should ask him to leave, because like I didn't ask him to come, and like why on earth did he even find where I was? And like, wouldn't you like get someone's phone number first before you like just show up, and then not even knock, just walk right in? I mean, the whole thing was crazy. And but here's the thing, I was so ashamed of my past, which is why I'm telling this story. I was so ashamed of my past and so desperate for like, you know, all my new friends to not find out, you know, what a terrible person I thought I was in my past, that all I cared about was getting him off campus. That's literally all I cared about. Getting him off campus before anybody saw him. That's all I cared about. And so, you know how like they always say in like movies, or I'm not comparing him in any way to anything that I'm about to say, but like, you know how like in like movies where people get kidnapped or whatever, and they're always just like, well, whatever you do, don't let them take you out of the car they're driving you in. Like once you leave the vehicle, like then you don't know where you are, you know, like then it's over. Like you want to stay the first place that they had you, right? So that's, you saw that with your own eyes before they put a blindfold on you or whatever they did, or drugged you or whatever. So it's like that's your point of reference, that you visually know where you are. And then once they move you to a second location, it's like, forget it. You don't know where you are. You're never going to be able to tell anybody where you are if you actually get a phone or can talk to somebody. So looking back now, I always thought that was my big mistake, is I took him off campus. Like I should have stayed there where there was like plenty of people and plenty of like even security. I mean, like it was like the worst thing I could have done is take him off campus, because all my support system, I just voluntarily walked him out. And then it was like a campus, and then you could go down into the town that was part of the I don't know, it was like a suburban town, but it had like it was all walking. You could walk to shops and stores and restaurants, and then train stop. And you know, it was a Saturday night, and so I had this idea, like scheming again, that I'm gonna like somehow walk him down. There was a bar kind of near the train stop to go back to the city, and I was like, well, what if I was able to get him, because he did like drinking, and I was like, what if I could get him sort of sauced up and then maneuver him towards the train depot, and then like tell him I'll see him another time, you know, and then he would leave and go home, and then like I don't know what I would do after that, but it wouldn't matter. He would be out of my life. That's all that mattered. Now this plan is also horrendous plan, but you know, I was 17 or 18, and so this is the plan I came up with. I was 18. Anyway, we're walking down the town towards this bar that I think that I'm, you know, this stupid plan, right? And of course I could have just told them like, I don't want to do this, I want you to go home. Like that would have been like, but I was too nice, of course, and I didn't want to make a scene, because I didn't, you know, everybody from campus often did go down in the town, and we did walk by one girl I knew, but we were on the opposite side of the street, so I thought, okay, maybe she didn't get a good look at him, so maybe I'm okay. So then that's when, you know, he wanted, somehow we had, I don't remember why, maybe he just did it. He had beer bottles. Maybe we did go to the bar and he got the beer bottles. I don't remember why you would be able to walk with open containers, but somehow he did. And then we had proceeded to have an argument, and then And then he wanted to go down into this park area, which was near the bar, but further away from the train depot. And he had these bottles, and then I felt like I had to go down there. And then that's when, what I've said before in the other story, when all that happened. So anyway, whole point of the story is, if I hadn't had the shame about my past, I would have never left with him. So this, I guess it's date rape. I hate to call it that because it wasn't I didn't plan to go on a date with this person. If I hadn't had that shame, right, and wanted to get him out of there because of how I would look, right, how I would be perceived by the public, if I would seriously not have had that, we would never ended up with him having glass bottles and us being in a park late at night where nobody could see us or hear us, right? That would have never happened. So for years and years and years and years and years, I blamed myself for that rape. I blamed myself. I never could forgive myself because I felt like without my making those decisions, I was the one who gave him access to this happening. And then that was a vaginal rape. And then the second time I was raped was when I was 48. And that was an anal rape. And that also I felt like was my fault. Because I was going through this period after my divorce where I had been faithful to somebody who, had a long-term on and off again, drug addiction. And I'm not going to get into any details about that, but the point is, not had a good marriage. And so when I filed for divorce and we got divorced, I sort of went through this, I don't know what you want to call it, wild phase where I was just been so lonely for so many years because we had, not a good situation. And there was online dating, and there had, the last time I'd been on a date was in the Stone Ages, because I've been married for so long that I didn't even know how people dated. And so anyway, I met someone online on some dating site, and I think no women should ever use those sites, but that's just my opinion after the things I've been through. And I ended up doing the fatal error that nobody should ever do, is going to his house, because he lived, I guess it wasn't that far. It was 40 minutes, 35 minutes from where I did. And so we were alone in his house. He lived alone. And I guess we were just, I'll admit it, we were kissing, and he just flipped me over and just, was just extremely violent and scary and on top of me, and was just screaming no, and screaming because it was so painful. And I honestly thought I'd never get them off me, ever. And then it was like, it was just all ripped up, and I just said I want my phone, my keys, because I had left them, I think, on the table. And he gave them to me, and I just sort of staggered out to my car, and I could barely sit down, and then I just, it was just blood, and I just put on, like, I think I put on, like, a coat over myself, over my skirt, and then, I mean, there was no one in the car but me, and then I just drove home as fast as I could, and then I just never told anybody about it, or I didn't do anything about it. I would never, because I completely thought it was my fault, because I'm the one who went over there. I should have never done that. It was the stupidest thing. And, yeah. So, there you go. So, why am I telling you this? This video's gone on too long, so we're going to stop. But why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because women need to be aware that if you're raped, there is something more insidious than the actual event itself, and how you're going to deal with that, and whether or not you press charges or don't do anything about it, or tell anybody, or do tell someone or tell nobody. Whatever happens to you, that's irrelevant to the other problem. The other problem is blaming yourself, the shame game, the blaming yourself and going over it and over it and over it. I've ruminated over it 1,000 million times. I'm not even going to go into all of it, because it's just, I don't even want to listen to myself talk about it. The amount of self-degradation, is that a word? The amount of hostility I've felt towards myself, and the way I've criticized myself and talked to myself in my head about it, is honestly unbelievable. I mean, I think I never even thought things as horrible about either of these men that I did about myself. I mean, that's how awful I was to myself about these events. I basically convinced myself at different points that almost like I did it to myself. It's ridiculous, because there was a whole other human being there, but it's like, women can just tear themselves apart, I guess, because the media tears us about our bodies, and about, we just have all these social obligations. Take care of people, you take care of your elderly parents, you take care of your kids, you do your job, it's like all these obligations, all these ways in which you're tied up with society, and it's just like literally you can't afford to have these things happen to you, because you literally have to keep it together for everybody. So it's like, there is no time to deal with this. Like, it wasn't like I don't know, like, it's not like I could go home and be alone, or like go to some program and with a therapist and figure it out. You have to go back to your regular life, like, immediately, and it's just like, there's nothing but you and your own inner critic. So only reason I made this video and told these things about myself, which I'm still struggle with letting go of, even though I have prayed about them like mercilessly, and hope one day to not feel such animosity towards myself about bringing these things on to my life, because it definitely psychologically made me a much more negative person, a much more almost like, I don't even know what to say, like a disassociated type person, like not a distracted person, times a flaky person. I don't know, just not wanting to be in reality sometimes. And I think other women should be spared that. And maybe if they hear this story, maybe sometimes when you see other people, like I saw a movie once with Jodie Foster when she was a rape victim. I think it was called The Accused. It was honestly a powerful, powerful movie. But like I saw that movie and I did not blame her at all. But why do I have so much blame for myself? It's like the same act, but I judge. I mean, I know that's a movie, but you know what I mean? Like, actually, I think it was based on a real event. But my judgment's so different when it comes to me. It's like something you can't even, like, stop thinking about. That's why I try to never think about it. But anyway, hopefully somebody will see this, and if maybe they can't recognize it in themselves, maybe they blame themselves and hate themselves for things they did that they think, especially with date rape, there's just a lot of blame for women, just an insane amount of blame for women on that front. Maybe they won't look at me and feel the same critical things that I think about myself. Maybe they'll look at this and see that it was the other person's, right? Because they're the ones who wanted these acts done. I did not want these acts done to my body. It was never anything I wanted to participate in. So maybe they would have more compassion for me, and then thus have more compassion for themselves and see it in themselves and slow down the criticism toward themselves. One day I hope to be relieved of it myself. All right, I'm at that time that I always stop these videos, so that's it.